The low tiers in Brawl, they're pretty bad. And it's interesting to note that the development and lead up to why these characters are bad in Brawl is for a multitude of reasons. Zelda and Bowser were actually terrible characters in Melee, and they weren't really changed during the transition between the two games. Both versions of the characters are extremely slow in speed, with very little benefits towards actually using them competitively. It wouldn't take until future Smash games they would finally stop being a low tier, but yeah, these characters had it rough, being bad for multiple games in a row. Link and Ganon were both mid-tier characters in Melee, and in Brawl, they were done pretty dirty, being not good enough to contend with the higher-tiered characters who heavily outclassed them in many ways. Again, similar to previously mentioned characters, both of these guys are pretty slow. I just noticed the whole Triforce is in the bottom tier, isn't that cute? Honest content just being honest content, just keeping it real. Something interesting to note, the Melee top tiers either got a free pass in Brawl, think of Marth or Falco, who pretty much didn't get touched with heavy nerfs and are still pretty viable in Brawl. And then there's Captain Falcon, who went from being a top tier character in Melee, probably one of the most iconic versions of the character ever, was thrown in the garbage, and honestly that could be its own video. Oh, and am I forgetting something? Yeah, get closer. Closer. Okay, here is the true character that was absolutely done dirty during the transition between Melee and Brawl. It's Jigglypuff. Jigglypuff got nerfed the hardest more than any other character in the entire cast. And I know what you're thinking, right? Jigglypuff in Melee was by far a really controversial character. Some would argue the most controversial character in the entire cast. It's mainly because of her high amount of airspeed, extremely high KO power, and also just being Puff. Some people are more at peace with the character these days, or you might be in the rare group of people that think she should be banned or something. I personally don't, but just goes to show how controversial the character can be depending on the time of day, I guess.
Have they played before a lot or no?
Oh my god, that's gross.
Now the character was very good in Melee, being the third best character in the entire cast, but in Brawl she was ultimately nerfed into the ground. Remember her iconic Melee back air, the Wall of Pain? It can be really hard to deal with if you're not aware of how effective this move is off stage. However, her bear was nerfed in power, range, even the engine itself nerfing its viability because Brawl is a way more floatier of a game, making it easier for characters to escape her back air. Not only that, but the hit stun is so low, the Brawl low tiers really have it tough because of the hit stun changes in Brawl. This literally means if you try to hit the opponents, the low hit stun will cause them to be hit back immediately. Hit stun canceling really does ruin the potential of a lot of KO moves for a lot of Puff's stronger attacks, as now there is an advanced technique that can actually combat her stronger moves. The technique was introduced in Brawl, and it's a big reason why a lot of the low tier characters are low tiers, because their combo potential is completely ruined by this technique. Her dramatic airspeed was integral to the character in Melee, basically a huge reason why she was so good in the game. She was completely toned down to be closer to the rest of the cast in viability, and this also further changed the way she plays with things like Brawl's air dodge mechanic, which basically meant you could spam air dodges off stage and be more likely to avoid some of the attacks. Characters in Brawl have much stronger recoveries too, leading to her ability to shark recoveries off stage like she used to, being definitely very nerfed. You might be thinking to yourself, wow, she really got gutted, honest content, but we really haven't even got to all of her nerfs yet. This is just the surface. Remember Rest? Easily one of the strongest moves in her entire kit in Melee. This move made her a demon at top level Melee because you truly could not count out the character with this option on deck. It's easily one of the best moves in her entire kit, and yeah, it was nerfed too. Rest has its knockback decreased, no longer being able to KO under 70% like she used to, which is crazy because on some stages in Melee she could KO as early as 10%. Her smash attacks, which weren't amazing tools in Melee but certainly decent, they were also nerfed as well, having less KO power. A lot of her special moves got nerfed, getting way more startup. Up throw lost its combo potential, so up throw resting at 10%, yeah, that's not happening. She did get a few buffs. Forward air did become a stronger attack. Down air is good at causing trips, which is Brawl's best mechanic ever made. Thank you, Brawl, for this. And the introduction of Dacus, at least giving her a new approach option, and rollout being a better recovery tool, no longer going in free fall. However, these few small sprinkled buffs didn't really change the character all that much. The buffs heavily outweighed the obviously the nerfs heavily outweighed the buffs. This is why she is such a terrible character in Brawl. She was nerfed so hard it affected her even in future Smash games, as in Smash 4. She's pretty much in the same spot reliability wise in future Smash games, being actually a bottom tier character, being the absolute worst character in Smash 4 outside of the Mii characters. Mainly just still being a weak character even after Brawl. And if we go even further to Smash Ultimate, Jigglypuff is argued to still be a low tier character in that game, although probably not nearly as bad as Smash 4 or Brawl Puff, but still pretty bad. Her nerfs in this game are the seeds of what the character would become in future Smash games, and it's kind of ironic considering the character at her peak in Melee was arguably one of the most controversial characters in that game, now is a shell of her former self. Here's a recent community tier list for Brawl as recent as last month, September of 2022. This tier list doesn't replace the existing Brawl tier list, but it does show some changes. While Puff did get a slight increase to a couple spots higher, it still means she's a low tier. It's pretty clear to see why she's a bad character in Brawl, and ultimately her being nerfed from Melee to Brawl led to her overall even worse placement in future Smash games. And if you want to know why she's bad, it all started here. Thank you guys for watching the video. Make sure to subscribe.